last part of the cross movement event, historical event more. I've got a speech from Adam from North Wales, which I'll read out in a moment. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and Russ and Pauline for putting hard work to bring this together. So we'll give them a quick round of applause just to appreciate it. I've got a message from Adam Phillips of BALCHDER Cymru, the chairman. Firstly, I apologise for my absence from this event due to family engagement. Secondly, I thank those who have organised the gathering and to those who are there or here today. Russ and Pauline, along with other BALCHDER Cymru members and supporters, have again taken the lead and shown that we in Cymru are starting to grow into our skin as the idea of nationhood grows in our people. Instead of shying away, we are remembering people like Richard Lewis and the events in which they feature. The Merthyr uprising of 1831, Tony Pandy riots 1910 and 1911, the Llanelli railway strikes and riots, Beth Abigail in 1969, and many such events up and down Cymru. People will draw parallels with recent events as people took the streets over the border. But where some might claim a degree of social kickback against government and the system, it looks like a lot of opportunists simply saw it as their chance to cause misery to their fellow man for personal gain. Of course, the media will spin out this official line, and we may never know the whole story. All I know is that we have given the state the opportunity to bring in draconian control measures and anti-demo gathering laws that will affect our civil liberties in the future. Remember the banners drenched in blood thrown by our boys, bore the symbol of a loaf and the cry, Causa Bara, bread and cheese. This lets us know how they were living, and the cry, Llaw Efrog Brenin, down with the king, tells us what they thought of the ruling classes at the time. In honour of Merthyr Martha Dic Penderyn, Cymru. What's your name, sorry? Matthew.
Okay. I was just asked to say some prayers, which I thought I'd do. I'm not an expert on Dic Penderyn. In fact, I've only started to really read into his life and his death since coming to this parish as vicar. And obviously we were fortunate to have his grave within St Mary's churchyard. So I thought I'd do is say some prayers and listen to what you have to say as well. So if you want to bow your heads in prayer, then you can do that. It seems to me that part of Dic's life was about a miscarriage and injustice. And so in our prayers, we remember not only Dic, but those who suffer, though innocent. So we come to gather to celebrate the life of Dic Penderyn, who lies buried here in St Mary's. We've come to give thanks for his life and legacy. As we remember and give thanks to God for Dic's life, we pray for those people throughout the ages who have suffered or died for crimes they did not commit. Almighty Father, you sent your Son to die for the sins of us all. He was innocent but was betrayed. We pray for Dic Penderyn and his legacy, and all who have been wrongly accused, that they may find peace with you in eternity. We pray too for those who fear persecution, but have stood firm in their beliefs. We pray for the nations of the world where there is unrest, where people's rights are ignored, and where justice is absent. We pray for all who work for peace and preserve the memories of those who have lost their lives. We take a few moments as we think about all those who have suffered at the hands of injustice.
Good afternoon. We are gathered here by the graveside of Dic Penderyn, who was a martyr for Wales. There were two particular reasons that I'd like to bring up. One is one of the democratic deficit at the time. It was a pocket borough. It was run by the Iron Masters, and justice could never be done when you had no representation. People were starving in Taibach and suffering from cholera and dying, and so they were up in Merthyr. But we have to put it into context. This area was a growth area. Merthyr had 18,000 people within a radius of 15 miles. It was the largest town in Wales. Cardiff, for 20,000 people, was growing to 200,000. the iron masters were running 144 blast furnaces, and their model of business is simply that the worker is simply part of. They can be laid off or brought in as and when. Whether they starve or fed their families was irrelevant. And so there was an uprising in the uprising. No relationship to the right that took place in England. It is 6 years later that the Chartists managed to raise 1 million signatures to then march on asking the government for reforms. And out of those 6 points, they've actually got them all. But that was only a democratic deficit, an injustice. You couldn't get anything done. You had no representation. And the injustice of not being an independent state is still an injustice undone today. When it comes to justice, Dic didn't find justice anywhere. You have to remember that the judges, when they went to a prison, their job was to empty. Now, if they found you innocent, great. But otherwise, it was transportation or hanging. The judge was successful when he left an empty prison. But Dic Penderyn didn't have a chance. To put it into context, Captain Truck arrived on shores of Australia. He saw beneath him blue seas, teeming with fish, unspoilt beaches, and lush green growth and clear water on shore. What was his first thought? What a wonderful place to put a prison. Benjamin Franklin said when he signed the independence document, you cannot dump any more people from England onto our shores. Criminals at the rate of 50,000 a year would be shipped across. When you understand that they tried it in Africa, when you understand that a healthy person would take 2 years to acclimatise to those conditions, and the people they were sending out were ill, disease-ridden, and starving before they went, then transportation was a death sentence. And Dic Penderyn had 11,000 signatures to ask them to commute the sentence. It was denied. The establishment of the day wanted to make a point. That man became a Welsh martyr. The definition of a martyr is a person who suffers death at the hands of an uncaring government. And he suffered death, and it's still going on today. Neda Salter, Neda, by the way, is translation for voice, was 26 years old. All she was doing was demonstrating in Tehran. She is now the martyr of that country. She was shot by government forces for simply being there. And this is the other part of being a martyr. Anybody do it in your face, in a crowd, Penderyn was by the establishment. So I'm asking the society to have a meeting every year now and invite some very prominent politicians and speakers to speak on the subject of justice and of democratic deficit, justice denied as far as I'm concerned, and build up the society, because this man is a true martyr of Wales. His last words were, O Aglwydd dyma ganwydd, which translated, O Lord,